Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. It's a pleasure to review books from Oxford University Press. They're always a very high standard. OUP have come up trumps with this very interesting new book, which when I looked at the title, I thought, what's all this about? Because I wasn't quite sure from the title what the book was actually going to be dealing with. It's called The International Protection of Adults. We'll look at the book in a moment. It's a hardback. It's quite a big book. It's been edited by a number of people actually, so it's a substantial tome in its own right. Richard Frimston, Alexander Ruck-Keene, Claire Van Overdyke and Adrian D. Ward are the people who've edited the book. Now Elizabeth and I found it a fascinating book to look at, and we had a discussion about it, and our title for the review we came up with as follows: Cross-Border and International Issues Relating to the Protection of Adults, the Legal Landscape Across a Worldwide Range of Jurisdictions. So we are talking really here about the global community and the protection of adults within the global community. So it's very much a book for the 21st century really. There's the front, there's nothing on the back. There's the front cover and the spine. You can see the spine, just standard house style. The book runs to 800 pages. There's a lot of detail again in the index at the back. I'm working backwards. It's a big index. You can see there it is. You can see the thickness of it, the size of it there. Pretty big. Then you've got a lot of appendices. 11 in fact in total. Starting there, International Protection of Adults Questionnaire. And then you get into the text itself. 53 different chapter headings effectively, with paragraph numbering, which makes it easy to find. There is of course footnoting for the usual suspects, which are the references for the cases, so you can find them in the law reports. You've got the book is split into various parts. For instance, part C here is the non-Hague 35 states, starting with the USA. And what you have got for each of the chapters, which is again very helpful, you've got a little index. So you should be able to find things pretty quickly, depending on what you're actually looking at and which country you are keen to look at. There is the front section, you see, and it's been produced in connection with STEP, Advising Families Across Generations. We are moving ahead now in this area. There's some very nice commemorations. I always like to mention that. People have put a lot of time into these books. A lot of effort goes into them. That's why when we review them, we don't review books which are rubbish. These books are very important books, and it's not right to slam them if they're actually, a lot of people have put time in. The foreword is in French, so you can read it there, and then after that's from Paul Lagarde, and then in fact there is a nice English language version there, which again helps you, and then you've got a preface which is actually in English. And again, that's from the main authors, and then there's some additional last-minute stuff just at the back. And then you've got the contents itself. You can see set out in different parts, starting with overall chapters, overviews, and so forth. And each chapter has the name of the person who's contributed to it. Just running through quickly because there are a lot of them. I'm just going to get to the end. There are 53. At the back you've got individual countries, and so if you've got a particular country you are interested in, you can find it. Then you've got the case studies right at the end, which is interesting and helpful. Then you've got the 11 appendices which are there, which are looking at Hague 35 and various other things, the articles and so forth. Then you've got an abbreviations, which again very, very helpful in this area. International law, anything to do with international stuff, there's a lot of abbreviations, and it really does help because it's so easy to forget what an abbreviation is, especially when you're getting to my age. You're getting a bit old. It's actually more difficult to remember. I mean, you pick it up quite quickly, but it is always there just in case, so there's no question of issue. There are some points there about the list of contributors, a lot of them, for the various chapters. It's quite nice to do that because a lot of people have obviously contributed, put bits in. I mean, I can't mention all of them, but you can see the huge range of people who've been involved. And then about the editors themselves, detail about them, Then you get the table of cases. Then after that, legislation, etc. And then the international table of international instruments is how it's titled there, which is basically articles. Then a useful little glossary, again very useful for international matters, running through a bit. Then you get straight into the overview chapters right at the beginning, in other words the introduction, fundamental definitions, adulthood, what that is and so forth, then running all the way through. I rather like the introduction. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. I think you probably remember that from a little while back. It's an interesting book, this one. This is what we say about it anyway. It was not a long review that we've done, but this is what we say. Published recently by OUP, The International Protection of Adults contains a prodigious amount of research, comment and explanation primarily on the legal issues and implications surrounding intellectual disabilities suffered by adults, a subject area which, as the editors point out, crosses all of the subject areas into which the law is traditionally divided. So the words are legal issues and implications surrounding intellectual disabilities, the basis effectively of the competent adult, if I can put it perhaps in a rather simplistic way, but that's really what we're talking about. Add to all this the international dimension and the phenomenon, at least in the Western world, of an ageing population which collectively has become increasingly more mobile, and the result is an area of law in which intellectual disability, which is actually frequently caused by Alzheimer's, dementia and so forth. I know it's split. I'm not getting into the technicalities of Alzheimer's or dementia itself, but it's the problem, because that actual dreadful illness has no respect for international boundaries or for people, and it has become an all the more complex, diverse, far-reaching and certainly challenging to practitioners and all the loved ones who have to put up with what has happened. It's very distressing. So it's an important book, and I think it'll be something. I've obviously had first-hand experience of this myself, because I've done a lot of reviews and mentioned that it's affected my family and it's affected a lot of other families. So therefore, I'm speaking from the heart to a certain extent to say thank you for producing this, because it's not something that's going to go away, and it's getting worse. As the boundaries open up, we find other people in other countries have got the same problems, and we as human beings got to do something about it, and that's what we're doing. This adds to the sum of our knowledge, and I thank the people concerned for producing it. The editors, 2 barristers and 2 solicitors, are all experts, of course, in the field, and they produce an important and useful work of reference, we feel, which aims to bring order and clarity to the confusion and the downright puzzlement created by the legal difficulties and uncertainties inherent in matters of intellectual disability in cross-border situations. You can see immediately what the difficulties can be, very practical ones quite often. So to this end, they've been ably assisted by a rather vast and impressive team of international contributors and correspondents from literally dozens of jurisdictions worldwide, in an attempt, in their words, to assemble a global picture, and that's what they've done. Now, the list of people at the beginning is quite daunting, a very large number of people involved in this, and I thank all of them for what they have produced. I think an important point to be made here is that this is not a book that deals with mental health law. Rather, it's specifically about what is called intellectual disability. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. There is a danger that as soon as there's a problem, whatever it might be, that it's automatically given the tag of a mental health issue, and that actually is unfortunate, because it does have connotations, it does have implications, so therefore you've got to be a little bit careful about what you're actually talking about. So what the editors here have done is they've been careful to mention that in the modern legal systems, intellectual disabilities and mental illnesses are treated separately. This, they add, is reflected in the scope of Hague 35, which is analysed in detail in part 2 in the book. And of course you've got the appendices at the back. Let me just remind you, Hague 35 is the Hague Convention on the International Protection of Adults of the 13th of January 2000, which references and follows on from the Convention of the 19th of October 1996, 20 years nearly before, on the protection of children. And Hague 35 and an explanatory report by Professor Lagarde of the Sorbonne, who also wrote the foreword, which is both in English and in French, are reproduced in the appendix. As the editors point out, Hague 3 and the Lagarde, in fact it's Hague 35, and the Lagarde report are fundamental to an understanding of this subject. Within its more than 800 pages, this volume provides an overview of the subject in Part 1, prior to a detailed examination of Hague 35 in Part 2. Part 3 presents discussions of existing law in over 40 jurisdictions worldwide, from the UK, Ireland and other British Isles, to the 7 Hague 35 states, then to the non-Hague 35 states, which include, of course, the US, Australia, 5 Canadian provinces and a range of others, that is, places such as the People's Republic of China, Japan, Singapore, Russia and Turkey. It's useful and detailed with its case studies, which are right at the back of the book in Part 4, and they offer background information and insights into a range of contingencies which commonly arise in this field. And for such a complicated subject, the book is accessible, clearly written and easy to use, with a detailed table of contents. Footnoting, of course, is throughout, very helpful, and there's a very detailed index at the back. Interestingly, contact details for the editors as well as the individual contributors and correspondents are supplied, as indicated in the preface, and that's a good step forward because quite a few people don't want to have contact with the end user of the work, and it's nice to be able to get a little bit of a dialogue going, especially in a modern era with email. Also note the extensive tables of cases, statutes, and secondary legislation, and of course international instruments. As this is an expanding as well as fascinating area of law, international lawyers, particularly those in private law, will no doubt regard this topical and timely book as an essential purchase, and I certainly think it is if your practice is in that area. And by the way, if it isn't, but you get a problem of this nature, you know where to go quite quickly, and that's the purpose partly of this review. And the publication date is cited at 2015. Let's just have a quick look at the book again. It's a heavy book, hardback, you see there, front, there's nothing this side, there's nothing on the back, but it is heavy. I was taken by the fact that the quality of the paper is very nice for the pages. The index is very detailed, as you can see, 800 odd pages. Nice setup. It's nicely set out. These are the appendices setting out across the jurisdictions and across the globe where we're going. There's Hague 35 Article 7 certificate, just to give you some of the basic documentation that you might need. Then we get those, again, Lagarde papers and reports there. These are the case studies I mentioned right at the back of the book there. And then what you've got as we get into the main, for instance, this is in, let me give you an example. Canada, Alberta, the provinces are covered. This is in the non-Hague part of the book. Then you've got the main bulk of the England and Wales and the jurisdictions here. Again, again, that's a good example. We've got the paragraph numbering and the footnoting at the bottom. Then at the front we just have another quick look. Nice dedication there, of course, which I mentioned, and the foreword, which is always worth reading. You get some idea of the motivations. Then, as I say, you've got a large number of the contents are very well set out, and you do have a very large number of the individual named contributors. Thank you to every single person involved. This is an area of our activities which is not going to go away. It's an important area to have commentary and assistance on. That's what this does, and OUP, very proud that you've done this. Thank you so much for it. It's very helpful to all of us, and I hope it helps you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.